Irene Malloy lived to be 81. During the last 40 years of her life, she wrote the one thing she could never tell anyone in letters. But she never mailed even a single one of those letters. When she passed away at Harbor Light Memory Care in Green Bay, the most valuable thing left in her room was a cardboard box sealed with tape. 114 letters were found inside the box. They were all addressed to the same woman at the same address. But that woman's name did not appear on any of Irene's official documents. When the Whitmore Legacy Bureau received the file, no one yet knew that this was not just a small inheritance, but a mother-daughter truth 40 years in the making. Arthur placed the file on his desk at noon and read the first page. Irene Patricia Malloy. Date of birth, April 14th, 1944. Date of death, November 3rd, 2025. Green Bay, Wisconsin. Harbor Light Memory Care. No known relatives. No will. Assets left behind. A bank account with approximately $4,200 and the contents of a self-storage unit. The file had come from the Wisconsin Probate Court, the court that handles inheritance and estate matters. It was a standard notice. The process of searching for relatives had been initiated but yielded no results. Due to the documents found in the nursing home room, the file had been referred to the Whitmore Legacy Bureau. Arthur turned to the third page. There was a short handwritten note from the nursing home director. An unsealed box was found in the deceased's room, marked EM, open. Its contents may affect the line of inheritance. Please accept delivery without breaking the chain of custody. Arthur read the note a second time. He picked up the pen on the desk, but didn't write anything yet. Evelyn was sitting at the desk across from him, staring at the screen. She spoke without looking up. Is the box still at the facility? Yes. No one has taken possession of it. No one has taken possession of it because the legal owner isn't clear. That's right. The director has notified the court. Evelyn turned back to her keyboard. Who's going to Green Bay? Clara came in at that moment. She was holding a cup of coffee, and her jacket was still on. She looked at the file on Arthur's desk. Anything new? Wisconsin. An elderly woman. No will. No known relatives. Clara took the file and read it. Arthur watched her, but didn't interrupt. When Clara reached the last page, her thumb paused at the edge of the director's note. There's a box. Why did the director write that it might affect the line of inheritance? Did they open the box? They did. There were letters inside. They look like personal belongings, but they're all addressed to the same place. Marcus stood up from his chair near the door. The letters aren't part of the estate. They're personal belongings. Normally, yes, said Arthur. But if there's the same name, the same address, and dates spanning 40 years, the letters could become evidence of a claim of kinship. In whose name? Arthur pulled the supplementary report from the file. The clerk had noted the information on the first envelope while opening the box. Recipient, Ellen Marsh. Address, for 12, Wren Street, Rockford, Illinois. Clara looked at the photocopy of the envelope. Are they all addressed to this address? According to the director, yes. 114 envelopes. None of them were ever mailed. Clara set her coffee down on the table. Marcus took the photocopy from Arthur's hand and typed the recipient's name into his phone. This time, Clara didn't put the file back on the table. In recent weeks, her father's name had unexpectedly turned up in an old file. Arthur knew this. Marcus knew it, too. As Marcus flipped through the photocopy, he kept the conversation focused on the file. For Clara, every missing notice was no longer just a matter of procedure. Someone who couldn't be reached, a letter sent to the wrong address, or a closed record was opening another door. Arthur kept his voice deliberately even because he'd noticed this. Daniel isn't in this file, he said. Clara looked up. I didn't ask. I know. Still, I have to say it. This is a new file. It's not a continuation of the old one. Marcus pulled his chair closer to the desk. Then let's set the boundaries from the start. Clara handles family outreach, but document analysis is Evelyn's responsibility, field verification is mine, and legal consequences remain Arthur's. Clara didn't object. She took the lid off her coffee, then closed it again without taking a sip. All right, she said. But if this box is really going to a child, we're not just looking for him because of the bank account. No one said that, Arthur replied. But first we need to know who that child is. Clara and Marcus set out for Green Bay early the next morning. Evelyn began retrieving the records in Chicago. Arthur obtained official search authorization from the court before noon. He also requested a separate delivery receipt for the box's transport. Harbor Light Memory Care was a single-story yellow building just outside the city center. A wilted November flower stood next to the front door. There were 2 cars in the parking lot. Paper snowflakes were glued to the inside of the windows. Facility Director Patricia Wren was waiting for them in the lobby. She was a woman in her 50s who looked tired. She was holding a plastic folder. Very few people knew Irene, Wren said as she led them down a narrow hallway. She'd been here for 3 years. She never had any visitors. No one ever called, not even on holidays. How was his health? Clara asked. He'd been diagnosed with dementia, moderate stage, but he had his good days. On those days, he'd write letters. Marcus slowed his pace. You knew he was writing letters. The nurses would see him. Sometimes patients keep a journal, sometimes they write on old photos. We don't get involved in that sort of thing. Did she ever put them in the mailbox? Clara asked. Wren stopped in front of a door. No. After she wrote them, she'd put them in the box and tape it shut. It sat in the corner of the room. In her final weeks, she'd moved the box closer to her bed. The nurses put it back in the corner so she wouldn't drop it. They entered a small storage room at the end of the hallway. The cardboard box sat on a metal table. It was cream-colored, with dented edges. The tape on top looked like it was from different years. Some was yellowed, some was newer. The label was written in black pen, Yem, do not open. Marcus put on gloves, took photos of all 4 sides of the box, and announced the date and time. Clara opened the recording screen on her phone. Wren signed the handover form. How many are inside? Clara asked. 114, said Wren. I counted them, but I didn't open them to read them. I saw the first envelope and called the court. Marcus picked up the box, checked its weight, then set it back on the table. Who else has seen this? The officer who found it first. Me. And the on-duty nurse, but she didn't look inside the box. Clara didn't touch the box right away. There were small indentations pressed by a fingernail along the bottom edge of the label. It was as if Irene hadn't had enough tape when she sealed the box and had pressed down on it repeatedly with her finger. They took the box with the court's written permission. Clara placed the box on the back seat of the car and looped her seatbelt over it. Marcus watched her before getting behind the wheel, then put a copy of the receipt not in the glove compartment, but in his briefcase. Throughout the drive, Marcus didn't place his briefcase next to the box on the back seat. He kept it on the front seat, at his feet. Clara noticed this. I'm not going to lose the box, she said. I know, said Marcus. But if someone in court asks, who touched that box, when, and where? Our answer should be a list, not a story. Clara looked out the window. The Wisconsin highway was gray. Sometimes a list is more ruthless than a story. That's why we need the list. Clara thought again about the label in Irene's room. Yem, do not open. The woman had hidden the box, but she hadn't destroyed it. What was hidden beneath the tape seemed less like a secret meant to be kept, and more like a call left at the wrong door. It was 4 o'clock when they returned to Chicago. Craft paper had been spread out on the large table. Arthur and Evelyn were waiting. The letters were taken out one by one. They were all white or yellowed envelopes. They all bore the same handwriting. Ellen Marsh, for 12, Wren Street, Rockford, Illinois. The dates varied. The oldest was from 1983. The most recent was from July 2024. Arthur didn't pick 3 letters at random. He set aside the oldest, one from the middle years, and the most recent, in chronological order. Before we start reading, let's make a note of this, he said. These are personal correspondences. We'll use their contents only to the extent necessary for identifying heirs. Evelyn added a separate column to the inventory list. Date, envelope condition, whether opened, summary of contents, and whether there was a claim of kinship. Marcus linked each envelope's photo number to the list. Clara noticed how Irene's handwriting had changed over the years. In the 1980s, the letters were upright and sharp. By the 2000s, the lines were widening. The name, Ellen Marsh, on the 2024 envelope looked as if it had come from a hand struggling to recall the very word. This woman didn't forget the address, said Clara. Or maybe she never had any other address, said Evelyn. Arthur wrote down the date on the oldest envelope. Marcus added the photo number. The table Evelyn had set up transformed the letters from personal mementos into a chain of evidence. When the dates were placed side by side, the span of time became clear, 41 years. Evelyn grouped the dates. The oldest is from 1983. Irene was 39 that year. Arthur examined the edges of the envelopes. Is it consistent? No. Some years there are 3 or 4. Some years there are none. Evelyn set aside the 1997 group. There's a gap from 1993 to 1997. Then it started again. Clara picked up the envelope dated 1997. There was a single sheet of paper inside. The handwriting was neat, but some of the letters were shaky. Today is your 34th birthday. I don't know where you are. I don't know who raised you. I want to look for you, but I don't know how. I want to tell you something. I didn't abandon you. They took you away from me. That distinction matters. I at least wanted you to know that much. Irene. Clara set the letter down on the table. Arthur took off his glasses, but didn't close the file. Marcus wrote the envelope's date on the delivery list. Evelyn returned to the birth record screen and typed the name Irene Patricia Malloy into the search box. Evelyn had already started working on it. In the Wisconsin birth records, she found a birth certificate registered under the name Irene Malloy in 1963, June 3, 1963. A baby girl. Father's name left blank. Mother's name, Irene Patricia Malloy. Evelyn printed the document and placed it on the desk. A baby girl. 1963. Arthur looked at the document. No father. No, but there's one more record. Evelyn turned back to the keyboard. 15 days after her birth, on June 18, 1963, an order for involuntary commitment, meaning admission against her will, was issued for Irene at the psychiatric ward of Green Bay Municipal Hospital. Marcus remained standing, not moving closer to the chair. Not voluntary. No, Evelyn turned the page. A family petition, signed by Richard Malloy, Irene's father. Clara looked at the birth certificate, then at the commitment order. June 3rd, birth. June 18th, order for admission to the psychiatric ward. Within 15 days, someone had prepared the paperwork, consulted a doctor, and gone to court. Arthur placed his hand on the table. We can find the adoption record, but in Wisconsin, court permission is required for closed files from before 1990. Also, if the child was taken to Illinois, there might be a second county record. The process won't be a straight line. Clara looked at the box of letters. Irene hasn't closed this box in 40 years. We can't close it on the first day. Marcus looked at her. There was no accusation. He was sizing her up. First, the address. Is Rockford still active? Marcus sat down at the computer. 412, Wren Street, Rockford, Illinois. Property records, tax records, voter registration. Property record, registered to Edwin Marsh from 1978 to 2011. Sold in 2011. The buyer was a construction company. The house had been demolished, and a 4-story apartment building had been built in its place. The address no longer exists, Marcus said. Who is Ellen Marsh? Clara asked. Marcus continued typing. There's an Ellen Jean Marsh in the Illinois birth records, born in 1962. Rockford, daughter of Edwin and Carol Marsh. Her last name was changed to Whitfield by court order in 1988. Not a marriage, Evelyn said. No, a court order isn't required for a marriage. Evelyn pointed to the date on the birth certificate. Irene's baby was born in 1963. Ellen Marsh was born in 1962. There's a 1-year difference. Around 8 o'clock that night, Evelyn found the name of the lawyer who had drafted the writ of mandamus. Raymond C. Pierce. Private law practice in Green Bay, 1958 to 1979. Areas of expertise: family law, guardianship, corporate filings. Evelyn wrote the name in her notebook. Then her pen hung in the air. Arthur was reading a file at his desk. He had placed the original copy of the order of commitment in the middle of the desk. Evelyn stood up and approached him. I've seen that last name before, she said. Arthur looked at Pierce's signature. Where? I'm not sure. I'll check first. At 9 o'clock, as everyone was getting ready to leave, Arthur handed a copy of the writ of execution to Clara. Add this to your file copy. Clara took it. Why are you giving this specifically to me? Because tomorrow we'll be researching Richard Malloy's lineage. This document doesn't directly alter the line of inheritance, but it shows what Irene's family did, why the child was cut off from the records, and which documents we can and cannot trust. The writ of execution isn't enough on its own, said Marcus. Nothing is sufficient on its own, said Arthur. We'll start with the death certificate. We'll move on to the birth record. If there's a placement document, we'll find it. If there's an adoption court order, we'll look for that. If not, we'll have to document its absence as well. The document in Clara's hand had two dates: birth and placement in the institution. It was clear that someone had tried to squeeze an entire life into the span between those two dates. But why so quickly? Clara was the last to leave the office. Before closing the door, she glanced at the box of letters. 114 envelopes lay on the desk, arranged in chronological order. Irene had written for years without believing her letters would ever reach their destination, but she had never stopped writing. The next morning, Evelyn arrived early. Ellen Marsh was born in 1962. Irene's baby was born in 1963. These two people couldn't be the same person. But for 41 years, Irene had written the letters to Ellen Marsh's address. Irene hadn't chosen that address at random. Someone had given it to her. Or perhaps Irene had found the address in a document, a file, or an envelope. If Ellen Marsh wasn't Irene's daughter, then who was? Evelyn wrote a line in the notebook and underlined it. Raymond C. Pierce. Where was he before? Sometimes a lawyer's name was just a lawyer's name. But in some files, the name appeared not on the margin of the document, but right at the heart of the matter. Pierce was involved in the placement of Irene Malloy's baby in foster care 15 days after the baby was born. Now Evelyn was trying to figure out whether this name was just a single transaction or part of a recurring pattern. She searched the Wisconsin Bar Association's old membership records. The data didn't go all the way back to before the 1970s, but some files had been digitized. The entry was a single line: Raymond Charles Pierce, family law, guardianship, and institutional petitions. Office, 14 Court Street, Green Bay, Wisconsin. His membership had been terminated in 1979. The reason was not listed. Evelyn moved on to the Green Bay Court Archives for the years 1961 to 1967. She found 4 more case records from the same hospital, prepared under similar circumstances. All belonged to young, unmarried mothers. All were women who had been institutionalized shortly after giving birth. In each case, the baby's placement coincided with the period the mother was held in the institution. And in each, Pierce's signature was present. Evelyn laid the files side by side. Then she took out her notebook and flipped back a few pages. She had seen the name Callahan and Pierce in an earlier file. Different state, different year, different context. This didn't mean it was part of the same chain. Not yet, anyway. She wrote only this in her notebook. R.C. Pierce, Green Bay, 1963. Last name to be double-checked. Arthur hadn't arrived yet. Evelyn closed her notebook and moved on to another search. Was there a document relinquishing parental rights? And if so, in which court had the adoption been finalized? At the same time, Evelyn examined the marginal notes on Irene's birth certificate. In old Wisconsin birth records, there was sometimes a small transaction code on the right side of the file. The code could indicate that the child's name had been changed, that the birth certificate had been sealed, or that an amended certificate, that is, a revised birth certificate, had been issued later. There was no such code in Irene's file. This absence alone wasn't proof. There could have been omissions in the old record-keeping system. But the absence pointed to the right question to ask. When Arthur arrived at the office, Evelyn handed him just one page. "Before I look into where the child went, I'm checking to see if the adoption was finalized," she said. Arthur read the page. "Good. Because if there's a finalized adoption, Irene's line of inheritance is assessed differently. Otherwise, this file is removed from the personal correspondence and goes directly to determining heirs." "We're not there yet." "I know," said Arthur. "That's why we're not calling anyone yet." Evelyn turned back to the screen. The absence of an adoption decree could also serve as evidence, but only if it was documented that the right official had searched the right archive using the correct names. Proving absence sometimes took longer than proving presence. Evelyn had learned to remain patient and to work with old records that didn't rush things. Marcus had headed to Illinois that morning. He'd found the name by cross-referencing voter registration and DMV, that is, Department of Motor Vehicles, records. Ellen Jean Whitfield, born in 1962, Loves Park. Loves Park was just north of Rockford. When Marcus arrived at 7 Birch Lane at 10 in the morning, the street was nearly empty. A single-story brick house, a small yard, a wilted potted plant next to the front door. He knocked on the door. He heard a dog barking from inside. Then the door chain was pulled. The woman who opened the door looked to be in her 60s. She had her gray hair pulled back, and her reading glasses rested on her forehead. When she saw Marcus, She didn't open the door all the way. Marcus handed her his business card. Whitmore Legacy Bureau. Marcus read, "I'd like to speak with Irene Malloy." The woman took the card, then opened the door wide. "Come in." The living room was tidy. The furniture was old, but everything was in its place. There were two framed photographs on the wall, a smiling woman and an older man, both taken outdoors. Marcus looked at the photos but didn't ask any questions. Ellen Whitfield sat down across from him. The dog moved aside. "When did she pass away?" he asked. "November 3rd. Ellen nodded. It was as if she had been expecting that date for a long time. "My mother," she said finally, "was a social worker at Green Bay Municipal Hospital. From 1958 to 1972, in the psychiatric ward. She knew Irene Malloy from there. In 1963, my mother was assigned to Irene's case. At the time, those kinds of cases were my mother's specialty, women who had given birth and been admitted to the ward. My mother would meet with them, follow up once a place for the baby was found, and handle the paperwork for the families." "Did you stay in touch with Irene after she was released?" "Irene was discharged in early 1964, but she never gave up trying to find her child. She wrote to the hospital for years. She never got a reply. Eventually, she tracked down her home address. I don't know how she found it. But in 1983, my mother received the first letter. She didn't write back. She didn't. But she didn't throw the letter away either." Ellen clasped her hands on her lap. She didn't throw away the subsequent letters either. The one at the start of the year, the one around her birthday, the ones during the holidays. She opened them all, read them, and kept them. Why? Ellen went to the small cabinet in the corner of the living room. She pulled a folded page from a phone book out of the drawer and placed it on the table. The Decker surnames in the Galena section had been crossed out with a pencil. In the margin, there was a date written in Ellen's handwriting, 2020. Beneath it, a single word, "I didn't call. After my mother passed away, I tried to call, too," she said. "I got this far. Then I stopped. Why? Because I didn't know if I had the right to say what my mother had kept silent about. And I was also afraid. What if that woman really didn't know anything?" Ellen went into another room. Marcus didn't touch the phone book page on the table. A few minutes later, Ellen returned with a small, faded metal box. The lock was open, and the key was still in the lock. She set the box on the table. "I opened it after she passed away. In 2019. There were three things inside: envelopes, a notebook, and this." Ellen opened the notebook inside the box as well. The pages weren't in order. Some were Carol Marsh's work notes, some were household expenses, and some were half-finished sentences. In the middle of one page, it simply read, "I am wrote again. I can't reply." There was no date. On another page, it said, "If Ellen finds this box, she'll want to burn it first." Ellen smoothed the edge of that page with her thumb before showing it to Marcus. "You didn't burn it," Marcus said. "No, because I didn't want to repeat my mother's mistake. But carrying the truth isn't the same as telling the truth. I've learned that over the past 5 years." Marcus didn't include that sentence in the transcript. What the case needed wasn't Ellen's interpretation, but the document that came out of the box. Ellen asked a question as she looked at the copies Marcus had put in his briefcase. "If you reach this woman, will you tell her my mother's name, too?" "We can't hide Carol Marsh's role in the case," Marcus said. "But we didn't come here to accuse her. We'll state what she did based on the document, and we'll also say what we don't know." Ellen nodded. "My mother wanted to be a good person. Sometimes I think people do the worst things while trying to stay good." Marcus pulled out another business card. "If you find anything else, call us directly. A document, a date, a name, whatever it is. We'll sort out the rest." I wish someone had told my mom that, too. Ellen pulled out a piece of paper. The title read, "Voluntary Relinquishment of Parental Rights." Below that, Irene Patricia Malloy. Date, July 14th, 1963. The signature was in handwriting. It was notarized by G. Harlan, Green Bay, Wisconsin. Marcus read the date. Irene was still at the institution on that date. In the lower right corner of the page, in blue ink in a different handwriting, was a single line. The patient was brought in with family accompaniment. A note was made stating that the signature was not given of her own free will. "CM, that's your mother's handwriting," said Marcus. "Yes. Why did she add that?" Ellen looked at the lid of the box. Maybe in case it was needed someday. Maybe because she couldn't clear her conscience. Maybe both are the same thing. Did she never show it to anyone? No, Because the person who wrote that note was also part of the process. My mother was there, too. She was complicit in the outcome. It was 2 o'clock when Marcus returned to the office. He called Arthur. He realized from the speakerphone that Clara was listening in as well. There's a relinquishment document, he said. Irene's signature. July 63. But in the corner of the page, there's a note in Carol Marsh's handwriting that says, signed under duress. Clara's voice came through immediately. Then the signature is disputable. Disputable, said Arthur. It's too early to call it invalid. Under 1963 Wisconsin law, we need to see Irene's capacity assessment, her medical records, and who was with her at the time of signing. Carol Marsh is no longer alive. The marginal note is a strong clue, but it's not a court declaration on its own. Arthur continued, let's make one thing clear. The relinquishment document claims that the mother gave up her rights. The adoption decree, the court's decision confirming the adoption, proves that the child was legally transferred to another family by court order. We've seen the first document. We haven't seen the second one yet. They're not the same thing. Evelyn said, Green Bay Municipal Hospital closed in 1997. The archives are at the Wisconsin Department of Health. We can file a request for expedited access. Irene's death certificate and the probate court's letter of authority should be sufficient. I'll also ask if there's an amended certificate in the Wisconsin birth records. Get it ready today, Arthur said. Marcus, ask Ellen to scan the other notes in the box. There might be placement information. Before hanging up, Marcus described the page in Ellen's phone book. Clara said, she called too. Yes, Marcus said, but she didn't call. When Marcus returned to the office, Clara was holding a copy of the relinquishment document on the desk. Arthur was in his office. Evelyn was working on the medical records request. Marcus stood next to Clara. Irene is getting to you, he said. There was no accusation in his voice. Clara didn't put the paper down. I know. Then you won't rush the case in her favor. If we act before the medical records arrive, this document will lose its value in the other side's hands. Irene doesn't deserve that. Clara set the paper down on the table. All right, the records first. That afternoon, Evelyn looked up the notary's name on the relinquishment document. G. Harlan, Green Bay. The same notary had appeared in several transactions prepared by Pierce between 1960 and 1970. For now, it wasn't the notary she needed. It was the court order. She launched 3 separate searches on her computer. Was there an amended document in the Wisconsin birth records? Was there an adoption petition filed under the Decker family name in Joe Davies County? Was there a child placement record linked to the Carol Marsh files in the Winnebago and Rockford areas? Ellen Whitfield called at 6 in the evening. Clara answered the phone. I went through the box from start to finish, Ellen said. There's an old card in my mother's handwriting. It's on cardboard, yellowed. Just a few lines. Clara held the pen. Will you read it? Ellen read. Placement, Galena, Illinois. Family last name, Decker. Baby's name, Carol, and Clara wrote it down. There's one more thing, Ellen said. There's another note at the bottom. I met this child once. 1970, Rockford. She was 7 years old. She knows nothing. She knows nothing, she repeated. Yes. Did she not know she'd been adopted? It seems so. My mother didn't write any further explanation. She must have come into contact with the Decker family for some reason that year. Maybe a hospital connection, maybe social services. She saw a 7-year-old girl. Then she wrote that line. How old would she be now? 62. Clara looked at the name on the page. Carol, and 62 years old. Galena. Ellen, she said. Did your mother have any contact with the Decker family in the years that followed? I don't know. There are no other records. Or at least I couldn't find any. Why didn't you keep looking into Galena? Before Ellen could answer, there was a faint sound, like the lid of a box closing. Because it felt like part of what my mother did. She waited. So did I? If I'd looked, I would have stepped into that woman's life right where my mother had fallen silent. Clara leaned against the edge of the table. You don't have to carry this burden alone. I read Irene's letters, Ellen said. All of them. Some are short, some are long. Some are just one sentence. Some are 3 or 4 pages. In different years, she says the same thing. I didn't leave you. After hanging up the phone, Clara wrote 2 lines in her notebook. Galena, Illinois. Decker. Carol, and age 62. Arthur walked out the back door. There's a name and a city, said Clara. Galena. Arthur took the notebook and read it. We don't go knocking on doors until the medical records come in. And we don't present the truth as a definitive fact until we've seen the adoption decree. First, we'll research the family history, said Clara. Cemetery records, tax records, old local newspapers. We can find the Decker family. We won't go to the door. Arthur shook his head. Start in the morning. And don't forget this. Unraveling someone's identity isn't just about knocking on a door. Arthur set another boundary at the same time. If Carolyn is found, I don't want Clara to go alone. You'll listen and explain the letters. Marcus will set the boundaries for the conversation, handle the chain of custody, and use legal language. I'll go, said Marcus. Clara didn't take this personally. Marcus being there wasn't against her. It was in the case's best interest. A few weeks ago, she might have objected to this. Now, looking at Irene's letters, she could see more clearly how every hasty decision turned into gaps down the line. All right, she said, but I'll be the one to explain the letters. Arthur nodded. When the documents are ready. Evelyn was the last to leave the office that night. Before shutting down her computer, she checked 3 calls. She was still waiting for a response regarding the Wisconsin amended birth certificate. The Joe Davies County Clerk of Court had reported that there was no record of an open adoption docket under the name Carolyn Decker for the period 1963 to 1965. A written request was required for an official negative search. There were still no results from Winnebago. Evelyn opened her notebook. R.C. Pierce, Green Bay, 1963. G. Harlan Notary. Carol and Decker, Galena. She added a new line below it. Relinquishment is on file. No adoption decree yet. She closed the notebook, put it in her bag, and turned off the light. That night in Galena, Carol and Holloway was still sleeping under her own name. When she woke up in the morning, she would drink her coffee from the same cup, wave to the same neighbor, and use the same last name. For a little while longer. Clara was at the office at 8 in the morning. She began her research on Galena. She searched the Joe Davies County Cemetery records for the last name Decker. 2 results came up. Edwin Ray Decker, 1922 to 1998. Ruth and Decker, 1928 to 2011. Both were buried at Galena Greenwood Cemetery. She found Edwin's obituary. Local newspapers kept obituaries brief, but rarely omitted family names. Edwin Decker, from one of Joe Davies County's long-established farming families, is survived by his wife, Ruth, and his daughter, Carol and Holloway. Carol and Holloway. Springfield. Clara searched the Springfield voter registry. Carol and Marie Holloway, born in 1963, Sangamon County, Springfield. Current address active. She wrote it down on a piece of paper. Carol and Holloway. Springfield, Illinois. 1963. Evelyn looked up from her desk. The birth year matches, said Clara. It does, but there's still no court order. Which records are missing? Evelyn flipped through the list. 1. Is there an amended certificate, meaning a birth certificate amended after the fact, in the Wisconsin birth records? 2. A certified negative search, meaning a document stating no official record was found for the Joe Davies County adoption docket. 3. An independent record showing that the Decker family took the child in at the end of 1963, a school record, doctor's record, tax dependency declaration, church baptismal record, or any of those. 4. Carolyn's chain of custody, the marriage record from Decker to Holloway. Arthur stepped out of his office. And 5. How we're going to approach Carol. Just after noon, a partial response arrived from the Wisconsin Department of Health. Arthur opened the envelope. Green Bay Municipal Hospital, Psychiatry Department. Patient, Irene Patricia Malloy. June, December 1963. One line in the clinical note dated July 14, 1963, stood out. Patient is oriented to time and place. Acute emotional distress observed. The relinquishment document was brought by the family's attorney during the consultation visit. Prior to signing the document, the patient repeatedly asked where the baby was for approximately 45 minutes. After signing, she cried and was admitted. Arthur placed the paper on the table. Clara read it. Marcus added the document's date to the case file. Lack of legal capacity is a tough one, said Arthur. It says she was oriented, but there was no independent counselor. The attorney came on behalf of the family. An allegation of coercion could be a separate basis. But we don't need that for the inheritance, said Evelyn. Arthur looked at her. Explain. If the adoption had been finalized, Carol and's biological line of inheritance could have been severed, but there's no adoption decree in Joe Daviess County. We also received a response regarding the amended Wisconsin birth certificate. The new parental information added to Irene's 1963 birth record hasn't been officially recorded. Marcus set down his pen. So the Decker family raised Carol, but they didn't legally adopt her. According to the current records, yes. To be absolutely certain, asked Arthur. We'll need to request a certified negative search, meaning a document stating that no official record was found. The clerk said the verbal search turned up nothing. I'll request the written document today. Also, there's a 1964 baptismal record for Carol and Decker at Galena Lutheran Church. The parent line lists Edwin and Ruth Decker, but the record type is marked as received child. This isn't an adoption decree. It simply indicates that the child was accepted into the family. Arthur nodded. Good. There's also a school record, said Evelyn. On the 1970 Rockford summer program list, Carol and Decker is listed with Carol Marsh as the emergency contact. This explains why Ellen's mother encountered the child that year. Clara took the page. She was 7 years old. She didn't know anything. Arthur didn't close the file. Now we're calling Springfield. But we won't reveal our true identities over the phone. First, we'll establish the boundaries of the conversation. Carol and Holloway answered on the fourth ring. Marcus introduced himself. Whitmore Legacy Bureau, Chicago. He said he was calling regarding an inheritance case. He gave the name Irene Malloy. I don't know that name, said Carol Ann. I know. We have some personal documents and family records that we believe may belong to you. It wouldn't be appropriate to discuss these over the phone. We'd prefer to meet in person. You'll decide whether you want to proceed with the meeting. How serious is this? It could involve your identity and family history, Marcus said. We don't want to rush you. If you'd like to have someone you trust with you, we can come another day. I'm available Wednesday morning, Carol Ann said. I'd like to talk alone first. I'll call my kids later if necessary. On Wednesday morning, Clara and Marcus went to Springfield. Carol and Holloway lived in a small stone house in one of the city's older neighborhoods. Above the front door hung a faded wreath from November. A single leafless tree stood in the yard. Carol Ann opened the door. She was 62 years old. Her hair was chestnut brown, with gray beginning to show at the roots. She wore glasses and had a watchful gaze. She had coffee ready inside. Before Clara even sat down, she got straight to the point. Before we begin, I need to tell you this. What we're going to discuss today may pertain to your identity and family history. If you'd like, we can stop here. We'll leave the documents, and we'll continue another day. You don't have to hear everything today. Carol Ann sat down in a chair. Go ahead. Clara began by covering the legal details. She explained that Irene Malloy had died in Green Bay in early November, that she had left no will, and that no known relatives had come forward. Then she mentioned the birth record, June 3rd, 1963, a girl, mother's name Irene Patricia Malloy. She then explained that Carol Marsh was listed in the file as a social worker and that the child had been placed with the Decker family through a private placement. Marcus interrupted to set the record straight. What we're telling you today isn't a court ruling. It's a chain of verified records. Court approval will be required for the final determination of inheritance. Carol Ann listened without touching her coffee. She kept her hands on her knees. Clara placed the final document on the table. In the Illinois court records, so far, no finalized order has been found showing that you were legally adopted by the Decker family. There is also no record of amended parental information in the Wisconsin birth record. Carol Ann took off her glasses. Was I not adopted? Legally, not according to the records. Edwin and Ruth Decker raised you. But the court order appears to be incomplete. Did they know that? We don't know, said Marcus. It's possible the lawyer left the process incomplete. We have no documentation suggesting the Decker family did this intentionally. Carol Ann looked up. This woman, Irene, is she my biological mother? Before Clara could answer, she turned the birth certificate on the table toward her. Yes, the chain of records indicates that. Carol Ann looked out the window. According to my family, my mother was very young, she said. She wasn't in good health. They described her as someone who couldn't raise me. I never questioned it. Ruth and Edwin were good people. I had a home. I was raised. She turned her head. But sometimes at night, it would cross my mind. I'd wonder why she never looked for me. She didn't fail to look for you, Clara said. She couldn't find you. Those aren't the same thing. Carol and didn't respond to that right away. She put her glasses back on. You mentioned letters, not on the phone, but now. How many? 114, said Clara. From 1983 to 2024. All addressed to Ellen Marsh's old address. Ellen isn't your biological mother. Her mother, Carol Marsh, was the social worker on Irene's case in 1963. For years, Irene thought that address was the only one. Carol and placed both hands on the table. What did she want from me? Money? An apology? What did she want? Clara took a photocopy of the 1997 letter out of her purse. Would you like me to read it? If you'd prefer, I can just leave it here for you. Carol and looked at the paper. Read it. Clara read the letter. Today is your 34th birthday. I don't know where you are. I don't know who raised you. I want to look for you, but I don't know how. There's something I want to tell you. I didn't abandon you. They took you away from me. I just wanted you to know that much. Carol and reached for the cup, but didn't drink. Ruth Decker was a good mother, she said finally. I want to say that. I loved her. She loved me. Nothing can erase that, said Clara. Irene's existence doesn't erase Ruth. Nor does Ruth's love erase the fact that Irene is trying to reach you. Carol and pulled the birth certificate toward her from the table. She smoothed the edge of the paper with 2 fingers, then looked at the line where Ruth Decker's name was missing. I asked once, she said, why is there missing information on my birth certificate? Ruth cried. I didn't ask again. Now I can understand why she cried. Marcus pulled a small list from the file. We won't proceed with the court process without your consent. The estate is small, an account of about $4,200 and some items in storage. But there are also letters. We need to complete the legal representation process to have them delivered to you. I want the letters, said Carol, and I don't care about the money, but I want the letters. They could all be yours, Clara said. After the court ruling, did Irene ever see me? No, except for a short time after the birth. According to the records, she was admitted to the facility 15 days after the birth. She later asked where the child was. She never received an answer. Carol and stood up and walked to the window. Was she at peace before she died? Clara answered carefully. She had been diagnosed with dementia. Communication was difficult in her final years. But she kept writing her letters until her last year. That's all we know. File a petition with the court. Do whatever is necessary on my behalf. But first, leave me a copy of one of the letters. Just one today will do. Clara placed a copy of the 1997 letter on the table. On the drive back from Springfield, Marcus was behind the wheel. Clara looked out the window. It was a 2-hour drive to Chicago. At least now someone knows who those letters were addressed to, Clara said. Marcus merged onto the highway. And we've proven it. That's the important part. That week, Arthur filed a petition with the Wisconsin Probate Court. The initial petition was denied. The court requested additional verification. The possibility of sealed files in the old adoption records, the interstate placement, and Carolyn's chain of identity from Decker to Holloway all had to be documented separately. Evelyn obtained a written document from the Joe Davies County Clerk of Court confirming a certified negative search. That is, no official record was found. No finalized adoption decree was found under the names Carol and Decker, Edwin Decker, or Ruth Decker between 1963 and 1965. The Wisconsin Department of Health confirmed in writing that there was no amended certificate on Irene's birth record. She obtained a copy of a 1964 record from Clara Galena Lutheran Church. Marcus confirmed that Carol and surname changed from Decker to Holloway through her marriage record. Carol and provided a sworn statement declaring that she was raised by Edwin and Ruth Decker but never had a legal adoption decree. Arthur prepared a supplemental petition. The list of exhibits was clear. Irene Malloy's death certificate, the 1963 birth record, the Department of Health's clinical note, Carol Marsh's business card, and a page from the phone book, the Joe Davies certified negative search, the Wisconsin Department of Health's letter confirming the absence of an amended certificate, Carol Ann's identification and marriage chain, and church and school records. The court rendered its decision 3 weeks later during the second hearing. Carol Ann Marie Holloway was registered as the legal heir of Irene Patricia Malloy. The estate consisted of $4,218, belongings in a self-storage unit, and 114 letters. Carol Ann didn't want to touch the bank account right away. Arthur honestly explained her legal options to her. It was possible to challenge the relinquishment document in court on the grounds that it had been signed under duress, but the outcome was uncertain, and the process would be lengthy and costly. Carol thought about it for a few days. Then she announced her decision. She wouldn't file a lawsuit. For her, the real change lay in the legal language of the court's ruling. She asked for two things from the storage unit: Irene's photos and letters. Three photos emerged from among the items in the storage unit. Irene was young, in her early 20s, standing next to a picnic table. She was looking at the camera but wasn't smiling. One photo had no date on the back. There was only a sentence written in pencil: before June. The office sent the photos and letters to Springfield. Harbor Light Memory Care's bill for the previous month was deducted from the account balance. The small remaining amount was transferred, at Carol Ann's request, to the genealogy section of the local library in Springfield. She had only one word written in the memo line: Irene. The library entered the donation record into the local family history ledger. Carol and also sent a short message to her children that same day. Come over this weekend. I need to tell you something about our family. Before closing the case, Arthur opened the file's last page. He wrote two words in the standard notes section: contacted, found. He put down his pen. He knew what this line would remind Clara of. There was no Daniel document she had hidden away. There was only an echo that would one day be spoken of. He placed the file on the shelf and made sure the cover was sitting properly. Marcus opened the case summary. He would normally write a single sentence in the result line. This time, he expanded the sentence a bit. The heir obtained legal rights through a birth record, chain of custody, and an uncompleted adoption determination. He read the sentence. He didn't delete it. Evelyn opened her notebook. She added a new line to the Pierce and Harlan section. Carol and Decker, Galena, 1963. Relinquishment on file. No adoption decree. The same template will be searched for in other files. The following week, a new probate notice arrived from Indiana. Arthur opened the envelope. A farmer who had passed away without leaving a will, no known relatives, and a seemingly small estate. There was nothing out of the ordinary on the first page. In the upper corner of the second page was the name of an old law firm. Arthur turned the page to Evelyn. Evelyn didn't open her notebook. She just glanced at the name. Let's look into this separately, Arthur said. That day, neither of them interpreted that line as the promise of a new case. The cover of the Irene Malloy file would close first under its own weight. In Springfield, Carol and Holloway sat down at the kitchen table that evening. Her husband wasn't home. Her children were out of town, but there were three small check marks next to the message on her phone. In front of her was a cream-colored cardboard box. Beneath the shipping label, the office clerk's handwriting read, Contents, Letters, 1983 to 2024. Irene P. Malloy. Carol and lifted the lid. She took a letter from inside. The date on the envelope was 2001. It coincided with her 38th birthday. She hadn't chosen it on purpose. She'd simply taken the one on top. She opened the letter and began to read. Irene's handwriting was neat. Some letters trembled, but the sentences flowed without interruption. Outside, December's gray sky had settled in. The streetlight was on. The lights in the neighboring houses were coming on one by one. Carol finished the letter. She set it down on the table. Reaching over, she took another one from the box. By the time she got to the third letter, she was no longer searching for Irene's voice. The voice was there. It was 40 years late, but it was there. If you were in Carol Ann's shoes, would you have had the courage to read these letters that had never reached her for 40 years? Share your thoughts in the comments. In the next installment from the Whitmore Legacy Bureau, we'll be tracing the trail of another legacy case that was closed long ago. Stay tuned to our channel so you don't miss the new episode.